Hi, we're going to cover a few topics today. We're going to look at narrowband kids. We're going to have a look at something we call the grey zone, which is just verging on that high zone. We're also going to look at the fact that kids don't fit in boxes, so we need to be able to use all these profiles together, and kids can be bits and pieces of all of them. So one in one sense, one in the other. Let's get into it. Let's have a conversation about it. I'm really excited about this one. Hi and welcome to the Move About YouTube channel. I'm Dave Jereb. I'm an occupational therapist and owner of Move About Therapy Services. I'm also co-creator of the Move About activity cards. And today we're going to do the last in what was meant to be a 4-part series, but is now a 5-part series on regulation and arousal and looking at the different profiles. So I'm sitting on Copacabana Beach with McMaster's Beach in the background on the beautiful central coast of Australia. And let's get into it. So in the first one, which you haven't watched, go back and watch, was on a typical nervous system, where we had a look at, we have a high zone and a low zone and a just right zone. Hopefully that just right zone is really broad so that you're both calm and grounded, but awake and alert for a lot of your day so that you can connect socially, so that you can connect with learning or work or whatever you need to be doing in your day. We talked about Eyore had a really big low zone and he plods along and never quite gets to crisp unless he gets the right input. We talked about Tigger, who might have a really big low zone, and he seeks and seeks and seeks and seeks and seeks, trying to wake his body and brain up, but often overshoots. We also talked about a type of Tigger that might seek and seek and seek and seek to feel grounded because he overreacts to different senses like sounds or touch. And so he's both a Tigger, but then also defensive, which was the last profile we had a look at, which was like where if Eyore was the low arousal guy, Tigger was the sensory seeker, then the sensory defensive guy was maybe like Piglet, or being completely anxious and reacting to the world, or maybe like Owl or Rabbit, being controlling so that things don't mess with my sensory self. So today, to start off with, I want to talk about a guy we call narrowband. Now, narrowband is not actually a separate guy. Actually, it could be any of them. But what I'm saying is that just right zone isn't broad. It's quite narrow. And so they go from woe to go really quickly, and it's really hard to find that just right optimal band of arousal where they're calm and grounded but awake and alert. So this really goes along with the fact that you can be bits and pieces of each of these profiles, and so that just right zone, it's really hard to feel grounded, and we have to help kids bolster out that just right zone. And one representative of this zone that I stick in my mind to sort of think about the fact that you can't fit kids in boxes is actually the defensive Eyore. And you think, how is that possible? If Eyore's the high zone and, Eyore's got a big low zone and this defensive Piglet-y kind of guy is the high zone, how can you have a defensive Eyore? But we often hypothesize that this guy has a really narrow band. And so he takes a lot to get going, but within certain things, maybe to touch, they can flip him right into that high zone. Now, this probably gets into a bit of extra complexity that I am and are about whether I should add it, but I'm going to, because I think it's super valuable if you can get it in your head. All these zones, we've kind of merged a few different concepts together. And what I want to say is the brain is way more complicated than a linear graph. And so this idea that there's just this one line that happens and how we react and respond is way too simple, but it's good for getting a snapshot. I'm going to break that down one step further and say that we have something called tonic arousal, which is basically how do you go throughout your day if nothing messes with you, and then phasic reactivity, which is how are you set off by things. And so you can have an Eyore that kind of plods along, but they're reactive to touch. So if a touch experience or a sound experience happens, that can shoot them up into that high zone, and they could be quite reactive with that. So just remember, you can have these different concepts go together, and a lot of the seekers, same thing. They seek and seek and seek and seek and seek to wake their body up, but they have a narrow band, so then they overshoot, and you go from overexcited to agitated really quickly. Another way that you might look at it, or look at some of these concepts like that Tigger I just spoke about, in our clinic we talk about the grey zone. And so we've added a 4th zone in where you've got high, optimal, just right. We put a zone just above optimal we call the grey zone. And this can be referred to as overexcited or agitated. And so it is the zone where you're not regulated, but you're also not dysregulated to the point of fight or flight. So this zone has really helped us, because often when we start to learn these zones and we think about it and we think, well, this kid's not fighting, they're not hitting and kicking, they're not fleeing and running away. So does that mean they're regulated? Or if they are doing those things, as soon as they stop doing those things, then we start using lots of language and getting them to say sorry and why did you do that and talking through that consequence. And then they've gone again, because they haven't sunk down into that optimal range. They've just dipped into that gray zone, which is actually kind of low-high zone. This is the zone you're in when you're having an argument with your spouse or your siblings or someone in your life, and everyone's talking but nobody's listening. All right, the sound's coming in, but you're thinking about your next argument. You're getting really narrow and rigid. You're not able to think flexibly and think of ways of figuring this out and problem solving. So a lot of our kids spend a lot of their time in that gray zone where they're not in fight or flight, but they're not really processing language well. They're quite reactive, and so you can still get to them with language, but if we can support them to dip further down into that optimal just right zone and be a little more grounded, that gives them a broader range to respond in their day. So all in all, what we want to do is say we all have sensation. We all have sensory diets. We don't all have good sensory diets. We all have bits and pieces of all these profiles. Some of us fit quite neatly as an Eyore. Some of us fit quite neatly as a Tigger, as a sensory seeker. Some are more reactive, but often we have bits and pieces in each of those, and our kids do too. So if we can recognize that kids don't fit in boxes, and we can find which part comes from there, what they need. Do we need to wake their body up? Do we need to calm their body down? How do we support them to be able to predict things in their environment? Thinking with that complexity is a really powerful way to support our kids. So in short, if I've totally complicated you, I would say keep it simple, make your best hypothesis, try things out, and if it doesn't work, try something else. If it does work, then that's fantastic. So that's the end of this 5-part series. We looked at a typical nervous system regulation and arousal. We looked at a low arousal Eyore that had a big low zone. We looked at Tigger, who either had a big low zone or maybe he was seeking to calm his body down. So he might be seeking to wake his body up or calm his body down. We looked at reactive kids who hit that high zone. They stay there a long time and take a long time to recover. We also talked about how sometimes that just right zone is narrow, and we have kids that fit in the gray zone just above that, where they're not calm and grounded, but they're also not in fight flight. So we do need to help them feel more calm and grounded if we want them to process language, to think and reason and plan. So that's it. Thanks for watching the 5th and final episode in this 5-part series on regulation and arousal across the day and the different profiles. I hope you found that informative and helpful. Please leave your comments below, and don't forget to hit that red subscribe button. Tell us if you have any ideas for future videos. We'd love to hear it. And again, I'm going to say it, hit that red subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more videos that we have coming up soon. See you next time.